If you think about the mission that Jesus left with us, with his disciples and with us, is to share the gospel. And the gospel is all wrapped up in what we're celebrating this weekend. The resurrection, the crucifixion, the prophecies that led up to it. That is the gospel. And this is a beautiful opportunity that Easter weekend is to share that. But the world has done a tremendous job at diverting attention away from the true gospel, and we compete with Easter rabbits and Easter eggs and spring outfits and things that are so unrelated. And I'm not saying that that's something that you can't do, but I think that the world has confused those things. Almost like Christmas is the same thing. It's like we have to compete with the things that the world presents to us rather than actually commemorate, especially here on Easter weekend. There are people there are churches who do Easter egg hunts, and it's like, what message are we sending across? This is not what I intended to say today. But I've been praying like crazy. Speaking on Easter weekend is probably the scariest thing. It's like, what in the world do you say on something like this? It is so significant. It is so powerful. This is it. This is our gospel, right? And what can you say? And here I am talking about rabbits, but I'm telling you, there is something wrong in the world that our focus is so pulled. Satan is so effective at pulling our attention away from the things that matter. What I want to get across here is that if you've got children who will grow up thinking that Easter is about chocolate and rabbits and eggs, keep the message separate. Share with them what this is about so they can grow up with a deep appreciation for what it truly is. So I think about Easter, and I hope that this is effective today because, like I said, it's been a very soul-searching week trying to figure out what in the world can you say on a week like this. I wish somebody else was doing it, but I'm hoping and praying that it touches you, what I have to share today. So I think about the range of emotions around Easter weekend, and so much of it can be so negative thoughts. You think about pain. That's one of the first things I think about when I think about the crucifixion. I think about pain. You think about fear. You think about disappointment. There were so many emotions associated with that, what happened there with the crucifixion. But it winds up in a completely different place. It winds up with hope and inspiration and motivation, and it's a story of victory. Yet so often we are so focused on the negative emotions. I'm going to talk about those a little bit, but really what I want to wind up on is the hope that comes with the resurrection. And I was trying to pull together a few slides to keep it brief, but I tell you, I think the most beautiful thing I've ever read about the resurrection comes from the Great Controversy, chapter 10, which is called the resurrection. So we're going to wind up by reading that together today. So that's where the majority of what we're going to talk about is reading from the beautiful book, The Great Controversy, where it talks about the resurrection. But I'm going to lead into that with some of the emotions, that range of emotions that just must have been exhausting for the people who love Jesus. So we have the utter unfairness of what happened there. First, the fact that he had to die for us, which he had done nothing to do, but the fact that he was so unfairly treated by the governments and the citizens and the people around him. So we have the unfairness. We have the separation of him from his Father. We have the heartbreak that was associated there with not only his disciples, but his mother. Some of his friends, the heartbreak of the angels. I don't know if you've ever read that, but the angels had to hide their faces because they couldn't bear to watch it. Can you imagine the pain that they felt, that they had to hide their faces? And that was the kind of heartbreak associated with what was happening. There was the guilt the guilt that was transferred. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever felt truly guilty about something, but when you take on something that you recognize something, that you have a flaw or you have a weakness or you are committing a sin, the guilt is unbearable. It feels so heavy, you feel like you can't stand up under it. Jesus took all that on from all of us, that guilt. Plus the guilt that the soldiers felt once they realized what they had done. There was a lot of guilt. There was the humiliation, which is maybe, I don't know, it speaks about my own character, but that had to be one of the hardest things for him to be humiliated the way he was, so undeservingly. Betrayal. He was betrayed in so many ways. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Disappointment on the disciples' part. Up until they buried him, they didn't think it was going to happen. They thought he could save himself. They were so disappointed when that didn't happen, and fear. But then we're going to wind up talking about hope, and we're going to read it a little bit. We're going to read all of chapter 10. Hopefully time will hold out and we'll get through that. Yes, I think it's very encouraging. Okay, we're going to talk about the unfairness. And there was so much about it, but I think this verse, I hope I can read this from here. If not, I'm going to copy. So I might not be able to read it. Actually, when they passed Jesus around, because nobody really wanted to make the decision on what to do with him once he had been taken captive. Pilate, this is in Luke 23, 13 through 15, Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him, neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. You can see he has done nothing to deserve death." So not only do we know it was unfair, but the government officials actually said to the people who were bringing him to them, he doesn't deserve to die. So it was fair, recognized that that was unfair. Now let's talk about humiliation. And we're just going to touch on these things lightly because I do want to focus on the hopeful piece of this. So in Matthew 26, 67 and 68. They spit in his face and they struck him with their fist. Others slapped him, and then said, now it's bad enough that there's this physical abuse that's going on and it's being allowed. But then they say to him, prophesy, Messiah, who hit you? And can you imagine how, for somebody like us who's human, how angry you would be for somebody to say that, to smack you down, tell me who did it. They were goading him. They were trying to humiliate him in front of the people who were there watching him. Also, I think one of the ultimate pieces of humiliation was when they made a crown for him. He said, you say you're the king, here let me give you a crown. And the crown they gave him was made from thorns, and they put it on his head. John 19, 2 through 3. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. And they went up to him again and they said, Hail, King of the Jews. And they slapped him in the face. So humiliation was a big part of the story and what was happening. Let's look at betrayal. So you know that he could expect to be mistreated by the people that were around him that were not that close to him. But here he is with his best friends. Here he is with his disciples. They're having their last meal together. And he's talking about what? Betrayal. And he says to them, Matthew 26, 20 through 22, when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. They were very sad, and they began to say to him one after the other, Surely you don't mean me, Lord. So here he is, facing what he knows is coming, and he is talking to them about one of my best friends here is going to betray me. And he knew who it was. And the one who betrayed him also knew who it was. I don't know that you would think of this normally in terms of betrayal, but he went to the Garden of Gethsemane because his heart was so heavy. He was going to talk to his Father. He wanted to pray, and literally in the garden he was praying that if there's any way possible that cup could pass from him. But if not, help him to get through it. And he's there, he brings his friends there with him, the people closest to him. He wants them to pray with them, and he comes out, and what does he find? They're asleep. So they were not recognizing the significance of what was about to happen, the intensity, the magnitude of what was about to happen. And he, being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly. And the sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer, he went back to the disciples and found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. How many times did he go back and find them asleep? 3 times. That shows, I think it's not a matter of they didn't love him. They did love him, but I don't think they ever anticipated what was about to happen and how significant it was and how difficult it was. I think that in terms of betrayal, one of the things that would have been, I'm just so grateful that I never had to face something like this. This is where Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And so he told him, he said, this is what's going to happen. You're going to betray me multiple times. And we want to look at this just for a second. Luke 22, 56 through 61. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light and looking closely at him, said, this man also was with him. But he denied it, saying, woman, I do not know him. Now Jesus told him this was going to happen. Before the cock crows 3 times, you'll deny me. Peter says, never, I will never deny you. Here's the first. A little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, man, I am not. Why did he deny being one of the disciples? Why? Fear. And I would like to think that none of us would have done the same thing, but there's a pretty good chance that we would have. After an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, certainly this man also was with them, for he too is Galilean. But Peter said, man, I do not know what you're talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. To me, that had to be the most heartbreaking thing on Peter's part. Not so much Jesus knew it was going to happen, he told him it was going to happen, but on Peter's part, can you imagine how he felt? And the Lord just looked at him. He was betrayed repeatedly. Let's talk a little bit more about separation. Now, this is also from a book that Ellen White wrote called From God's Amazing Grace. And when he was in the garden, he began to recognize and feel what it's going to be like to be separated from his Father. We can have but faint conceptions of the inexpressible anguish of God's dear Son in Gethsemane as he realized his separation from his Father. In consequence of bearing man's sin, he became sin for the fallen race. The sense of withdrawal of his Father's love pressed from his anguished soul these mournful words, my soul is exceeding sorrowful even unto death. We're also told that the blood that he perspired, and it was blood, not just perspiration. And that was because of the separation from him and his Father. It was not a physical problem, but from the heartbreak. Yeah, so we're going to talk about hope. Yeah, this is pretty dark and heavy thoughts that we're having here. It makes us feel heavy-hearted. It makes you feel guilty in a lot of cases because we know we contributed to that. It's because of our sins that this happened. But I want to finish out this thought process, and then we're going to focus on the hope that comes at the end. So heartbreak. This is also from the Great Controversy in chapter 9. If you have nothing important to do today, read chapter 9 and 10, the Great Controversy. It would be a beautiful thing to do this weekend. The angels had viewed the horrid scene of the crucifixion of their loved commander until they could behold no longer, and they veiled their faces from the sight. The sun even refused to shine upon the dreadful scene. And I didn't leave it all in there, but the same thing it talked about with the disciples. They couldn't bear it anymore. His mother couldn't bear to look on it. It was so heartbreaking. So, yes, the crucifixion was all of these things. It was humiliation, it was disappointment, it was fear, but it was true heartbreak when they realized what this actually meant. And then there was fear. The fear, I think, was a part all the way up to the crucifixion, but once he died, fear really and truly sat him. Okay, the shaking of the earth, let me turn this over, I'm sorry. The shaking of the earth, the rending of the rocks, the darkness spread over the earth, and the loud, strong cry. Now, Jesus was weak at this point, physically weak to the point of dying, but his voice came out loud and clear and strong. It is finished. And he yielded up his life, troubled his enemies, and made his murderers tremble. Why did they tremble? What happened? What was the difference up to the point where he was still alive and he died? When he died and it was dark and the earthquake came and the curtain was rent, there was no doubt in their minds at that point what they had done. And the fear set in and they were terrified. The disciples were also terrified, if you've thought about that. Now, I know you know that they're disappointed, they're sad, they're scared, but now they're afraid because they crucified Jesus, so they're going to now crucify me. Am I the next on the target? So now there was fear for a number of different reasons. But in spite of all of this story of pain and just indescribable anguish, and one of the reasons I don't watch The Passion of the Christ is I don't think I can handle it. I don't think there's any way I can watch that and not sob my heart out, because seeing it for what it was is almost more than we can bear. So we read about it, but I don't think I'll ever want to have to look at it. But then there is this story that it doesn't end there. It ends later with the resurrection. We're going to look into that. It's 1 Peter 1:3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. So it is truly a story of victory. But what I want to do now, and I did pretty good 10 minutes there, I want to all of us participate and read from chapter 10, so we don't just have to hear me talking. But I don't want you to read this like the menu for a restaurant or for the stock market or something boring like that. We want to read this for truly what she was conveying here and the emotion that should follow it. And I'm going to start with you, Jeanette, if you don't mind. If you can see this, okay? If you don't mind, and standing there is beautiful if you'll do that. We're going to read, this is chapter 10 from the Great Controversy.
The disciples rested on the Sabbath, sorrowing for the death of their Lord, while Jesus, the King of glory, rested in the sepulchre. The night had worn slowly. I'm sorry to use it.
You may have to change sides.
Yeah.
No.
I'm very sorry.
No, that's fine. It's very small. It's very small print.
The night had worn slowly away, and while it was yet dark, the angels hovering over the sepulchre knew that the time of the release of God's dear Son, their loved commander, had nearly come. And as they were waiting with the deepest emotion, the hour of his triumph, a strong and mighty angel came flying swiftly from heaven. His face was like the lightning, and his garments white as snow. The light dispersed the darkness from his track and caused the evil angels who had triumphantly claimed the body of Jesus to flee in terror from his brightness and glory. One of the angelic host who had witnessed the scene of Jesus' humiliation and was watching his sacred resting place joined the angel from heaven, and together they came down to the sepulchre. The earth shook and trembled as they approached, and there was a mighty earthquake. The strong and mighty angel laid hold of the stone and quickly rolled it away from the door of the sepulchre and sat upon it.
What do you think, just for a minute, how do we get this description? How do we know that there was a mighty angel who came from heaven? How do we know that there were angels there at the crucifixion who were hovering around the sepulchre? How do we know that?
It's in the Bible.
And Ellen White saw it in vision, okay? She actually, it goes in vision, she can see these things that human beings could not see. right? So they didn't know about the big angel coming from. That was not something that could be seen. Ellen White saw that. God showed it to her so that she could share that with us. And so that's the description. That is what she literally saw. Pam, would you read?
Terrible fear seized the guard. Where was now their power to keep the body of Jesus? They did not think of their duty or of the disciples stealing him away. They were amazed and affrighted as the exceeding bright light of the angels shone all around brighter than the sun. The Roman guard saw the angels and fell as dead men to the ground. One angel rode back the stone in triumph and with a clear and mighty voice cried out, Thou Son of God, thy Father calls thee, come forth. Death could hold dominion over him no longer. Jesus arose from the dead.
So he's not in the sepulchre waiting. The angel called him and said to him, Your Father calls you, come forth. And he wakes up from the state he was in, and death could hold him no longer. He walked out at the beckoning of those angels. Pam, would you go ahead?
The other angel entered the sepulchre, and as Jesus arose in triumph, he unbound the napkin which was about his head, and Jesus walked forth a victorious conqueror. In solemn awe, the angelic host gazed upon the scene, and as Jesus walked forth from the sepulchre in majesty, those shining angels prostrated themselves to the ground and worshipped him, then hailed him with songs of victory and triumph, that death could hold its divine captive no longer. Satan did not now triumph. His angels had fled before the bright, penetrating light of the heavenly angels. They bitterly complained to their king that their prey had been taken violently from them, and that he whom they so much hated had risen from the dead.
Okay, Satan's angels were there also. Why do you think they were there? If the disciples or anyone else had been able to take his body and remove it, then that would add validation to the claim that he was the Son of God. They did not want that to happen. They were taking every precaution to make sure that he could not be moved, and they would think that he was alive if he wasn't. So the guards were there, Satan's angels were there to make sure that didn't happen. Yet God sent an angel that was stronger, more powerful. What happened? They flee. They ran. They go back to Satan and they complained to him that their prey had been taken violently from them, and that the one they hated so much had risen from the dead, which really meant what? At that moment, what did they realize? He was defeated. And that was the point where they saw it for the first time. Had to recognize he was defeated. There was going to be consequences for everything that he had done. There was no more opportunity to defeat Jesus. So he turns his attention to us. All right, Cindy, would you mind reading?
Satan and his angels had enjoyed a little moment of triumph, that their power over fallen man had caused the Lord of life to be laid in the grave. But short was their hellish triumph. For as Jesus walked forth from his prison house, a majestic conqueror, Satan knew that after a season he must die, and his kingdom pass unto him whose right it was. He lamented and raged that notwithstanding all his efforts and power, Jesus had not been overcome, but had laid open a way of salvation for man, and whosoever would might walk in it and be saved. For a little, Satan seemed sad and showed distress. He held a council with his angels to consider that they should engage in next to work against the government of God. Said Satan, You must hasten to the chief priests and elders. We succeeded in deceiving them and blinding their eyes and hardening their hearts against Jesus. We made them believe he was an impostor, that Roman guard will carry the hateful news that Christ is risen. We led the priests and elders on to hate Jesus and to murder him. Now hold it before them in a bright light, that as they were his murderers, if it becomes known that Jesus is risen, they will be stoned to death by the people and that they killed an innocent.
So now they're trying to go back and confer with each other to figure out how do we minimize the damage that's happened? How do we keep them from stoning the governors who had sentenced him to be murdered, or turned him over to do that? The people are the ones who actually made that declaration. So they're trying to go back now. What's plan B? What they're trying to put together. Let's get a loud voice. Katie, would you read for me?
Thanks, Emily. I saw the Roman guard as the angelic host passed back to heaven, and the light of the Lord passed away, raised themselves to see if it were safe for them to look around. They were filled with amazement as they saw that the great stone was rolled from the door of the sepulchre, and Jesus was risen. They hastened to the chief priests and elders with the wonderful story of what they had seen. And as those murderers heard the marvelous report, paleness sat upon every face. Horror seized them at what they had done. They then realized that if the report was correct, they were lost. For a little they were stupefied, and looked one to the other in silence, not knowing what to do or say. They were placed where they could not believe unless it be to their own condemnation.
Tough reading, tougher spot to be in if you think about it. It's like if I believe what you're telling me, then I'm condemned, I'm lost. What have we done? At this point, they begin to realize what they have done.
They went aside by themselves to consult what should be done. They decided that if it should be spread abroad that Jesus had risen, and the report of such amazing glory, which caused the guard to fall like dead men, should come to the people, they would surely be enraged and would slay them. They decided to hire the soldiers to keep the matter secret. They offered them much money, saying, "Say ye, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept." And when the guard inquired what should be done with them for sleeping at their post, the priests and elders said that they would persuade the governor and save them. For the sake of money, the Roman guard sold their honor and agreed to follow the counsel of the priests and elders.
Typical government. We're caught. Let's pay our way out of it. We will pay the guards to not disclose the story so that we will be saved, because they're going to kill us when they realize what happened. You're doing good.
When Jesus, as he hung upon the cross, cried out, "It is finished," the rocks rent, the earth shook, and some of the graves were shaken open. For when Jesus arose from the dead and conquered death and the grave, when he walked forth from his prison house a triumphant conqueror, while the earth was reeling and shaking and the excellent glory of heaven clustered around the sacred spot, obedient to his call, many of the righteous dead came forth as witnesses that he had risen. Those favored, resurrected saints came forth glorified. There were a few chosen and holy ones who had lived in every age from creation, even down to the days of Christ. And while the chief priests and Pharisees were seeking to cover up the resurrection of Christ, God chose to bring up a company from their graves to testify that Jesus had risen and to declare his glory.
And so you have action and you have what is the word? He is offsetting what's about to happen. God had a plan. So he resurrected, selected people who would be influential, who could testify to what had actually happened, to undermine the story, the false story that they were going to spread. I think it's interesting, and it may go on the next page, where she says they look different. You think about it, down to the ages, up to the time of Adam, to the time where this happened, people had degraded and digressed so much and have become such a former, just a pale shadow of what they used to be. Here they are, big in stature and beautiful and powerful and smart, and it was very obvious they were not from there, right? Or from that place or that time. All right, Samantha, would you read?
Those who were resurrected were of different stature and form. I was informed that the inhabitants of earth had been degenerating, losing their strength and comeliness. Satan has the power of disease and death, and in every age the curse has been more visible, and the power of Satan more plainly seen. Some of those raised were more noble in appearance and form than others. I was informed that those who lived in the days of Noah and Abraham were more like the angels in form, in comeliness and strength. But every generation has been growing weaker and more subject to disease, and their lives of shorter duration. Satan has been learning how to annoy men and enfeeble the race.
But Lord, do we still feel that today? It says he has the power of disease and death. And we live with that every day. Ourselves personally, our children, those around us, he is dismantling this world piece by piece and the people in it. And so you could see that right there. You could see it in the difference in the people who had been resurrected and those who were living in that time.
Those holy ones who came forth after the resurrection of Jesus appeared unto many, telling them that the sacrifice for man was completed, that Jesus, whom the Jews crucified, had risen from the dead, and added, we be risen with him. They bore testimony that it was by his mighty power that they had been called forth from their graves. Notwithstanding the lying reports circulated, the matter could not be concealed by Satan, his angels, or the chief priests, for this holy company, brought forth from their graves, spread the wonderful, joyful news. Also Jesus showed himself unto his sorrowing, heartbroken disciples, dispelling their fears and causing them gladness and joy. As the news spread from city to city and from town to town, the Jews in their turn were afraid for their lives and concealed the hate that they cherished towards the disciples. Their only hope was to spread their lying report, and those who wished this lie to be true believed it. Pilate trembled. He believed the strong testimony given that Jesus was risen from the dead, and that the many others he had brought up with him, and his peace left him forever. For the sake of worldly honor, for fear of losing his authority and his life, he delivered Jesus to die. He was now fully convinced that it was not merely a common, innocent man of whose blood he was guilty, but the blood of the Son of God. Miserable was the life of Pilate, miserable to its close. Despair and anguish crushed every hopeful, joyful feeling. He refused to be comforted and died a most miserable death.
Okay. Allie, would you be willing to read?
I'll try. Cataracts and all. Herod's heart grew still harder, and when he heard that Jesus had risen, he was not much troubled. He took the life of James, and when he saw that this pleased the Jews, he took Peter also, intending to put him to death. But God had a work for Peter to do, and sent his angel and delivered him. Herod was visited with judgment. God smote him in the sight of a great multitude, as he was exalting himself before them, and he died a horrible death.
Amy, would you read?
Early in the morning, before it was yet light, the holy women came to the sepulchre, bringing sweet spices to anoint the body of Jesus. When lo, they found the heavy stone rolled away from the door of the sepulchre, and the body of Jesus was not there. Their hearts sunk within them, and they feared that their enemies had taken away the body. And behold, two angels in white apparel stood by them. Their faces were bright and shining. They understood the errand of the holy women, and immediately told them that they were seeking Jesus, but he was not there. He had risen, and they could behold the place where he lay. They bid them go to tell his disciples that he would go before them into Galilee.
In spite of all that he had told them about what would happen, they still thought somebody had taken him. They didn't understand that he had been resurrected, even at this point. Start picking on the back row. Derek, would you mind reading? Susan?
But the women were frightened and astonished. They hastily ran to the disciples who were mourning and could not be comforted because their Lord had been crucified. They hurriedly told them the things which they had seen and heard. The disciples could not believe that he had risen, but with the women who had brought the report, ran hastily to the sepulchre and found that there truly Jesus was not there. There were his linen clothes, but they could not believe the good news that Jesus had risen from the dead. They returned home, marveling at the things they had seen, also as the report brought them by the women.
I think we're getting close here to the end. And I'm going to skip right by you because I saw your head going. Danny, would you read?
Mary chose to linger around the sepulchre, thinking of what she had seen, and distressed with the thought that she might have been deceived. She felt that new trials awaited her. Her grief was renewed, and she broke forth in bitter weeping. She stooped down to look again into the sepulchre, and beheld 2 angels clothed in white. Their countenances were bright and shining. One was sitting at the head, the other at the feet where Jesus had lain. They spoke to her tenderly and asked her why she wept. She replied, "They have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him."
Would you read that, please?
And as she turned from the sepulchre, she saw Jesus standing by her, but knew him not. Jesus spoke tenderly to Mary and inquired the cause of her sorrow, and asked her whom she was seeking. She supposed he was the gardener, and begged of him, if he had borne away her Lord, to tell her where he had laid him, and she would take him away. Jesus spoke to her with his own heavenly voice, and said, "Mary."
He had changed at this point. Now, he had not been back to his father yet, but he didn't look like he looked just before he died, because she didn't recognize him. She recognized his voice, but not his appearance. And he tells her, Kyle, can you see that? Would you read it?
She was acquainted with the tones of that dear voice, and quickly answered, "Master," and with joy and gladness was about to embrace him, but Jesus stood back and said, "Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." Joyfully she hastened to the disciples with the good news. Jesus quickly ascended up to his Father to bear from his lips that he accepted the sacrifice, that he had done all things well. He received all power in heaven and upon earth from his Father.
Okay, he went back for 2 reasons. One of them was he had to know that God had accepted his sacrifice. He didn't know. He had gone through all of that, had been resurrected, but he still didn't know if that was sufficient until God told him himself that it was. And if it was, he needed strength. He needed the power that would come from heaven to do what he needed to do before he again returned to the Father. All right, let's see. We're going to pick on Jack. Would you, Pam pointed at you, Jack. Would you read this?
Angels like a cloud surrounded the Son of God, and bid the everlasting gates to be lifted up. Got the King of Glory mine. I saw that while Jesus was with that bright heavenly host, and in the presence of his Father, and the glory of God surrounded him. He did not forget his 4 disciples upon earth, but received power from his Father, that he might return to them, and while with them, impart power unto them. The same day he returned and showed himself to his disciples. He suffered them then to touch him, for he had ascended to his Father and had received power. Jesus remained with his disciples 40 days, causing them joy and gladness of heart, and opening to them more fully the realities of the kingdom of God. He commissioned them to bear testimony to the things which they had seen and heard concerning the sufferings, death, and resurrection, that he had made a sacrifice for sin, that all who would might come to him and find life. He with fearful tenderness told them that they would be persecuted and distressed, but they would find relief in referring to their experience and remembering the words he had spoken to them.
Why did the disciples need encouragement? Why did they need to be strengthened? What was facing them? They had a mighty work to do, one that they were unsure of their ability to do. And they faced hard times, and they faced deaths almost comparable to what Jesus had. They were, in all cases, almost all. Did anybody die of old age? John and Patmos. But everybody else died either by, they were hung upside down, they were beheaded, they were stoned, they were horrible deaths waiting all of them. And there's no promise that life is going to be easy for any Christian. It certainly wasn't for the disciples. Mary Ann?
He told them that he had overcome the temptations of the devil and maintained the victory through the trials and suffering, that Satan could no more have power over him, that he would directly bring this temptation and power to bear upon them and upon all who should believe in his name. He told them that they would overcome as he had overcome. Jesus endowed his disciples with power to do miracles, and he told them that although the wicked men should have power over their bodies, he would at certain times send his angels and deliver them, that their lives could not be taken from them until their mission should be accomplished. And when their testimony should be finished, their lives might be required to seal the testimonies which they have borne.
So not the best of missions or commissions to be laid out in front of you, right? But they were ready. I mean, now that they had seen this, they'd experienced this, they were ready to step up for what was facing them.
His anxious followers gladly listened to his teachings. They eagerly feasted upon every word which fell from his holy lips. Then they certainly knew that he was the Savior of the world. Every word sunk with deep weight into their hearts, and they sorrowed that they must be parted from their blessed heavenly teacher, that after a little they should no more hear comforting, glorious words from his lips. But again their hearts were warmed with love and exceeding joy, as Jesus told them that he would go and prepare mansions for them, and come again and receive them, that they might ever be with him. He told them that he would send them the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, to guide, bless, and lead them into all truth. And he lifted up his hands and blessed them. Because Jesus was crucified and resurrected, we have hope. Hope over the past, that our failures are not greater than God's power to transform. Hope for the present, that we are not alone. Hope for the future, that we will be redeemed.
So it is a story of victory, of hope, of courage. That's where our salvation lies in what happened over those 3 days. Not just the 3 days, there's much more before, much more after, but that is where the story is wrapped up in a way that we can share it. Now, I think it's very easy to grow up seeing this almost as fiction. You see it almost as a fairy tale, or something that we've read about that wasn't real. This was real. The history books support it. When people want to say it's in the Bible, but it's, how do I know that's true? Even the history books support it. This happened. This is not fiction. This is real. The emotions that were behind it were real. Our contribution to that is just as real as it was for those who were sinners in that day. We're promised that the wages of sin is death, and we are all sinners. And the only way that we cannot suffer that final death is because of that sacrifice and our responsibility to accept that. And that's what I wanted to close out with. Because Jesus died for sin doesn't mean everybody in the world is going to be saved. Right? We have to accept that. We have to accept that sacrifice on everything. Some people will and some people will not accept it. And here's what we're told in John chapter 3, verses 20 and 21. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. You see that and go backwards. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them. So yes, it's a beautiful story, and it's a story of hope, but it's also a story of acceptance. It's turned over to us. We share that message, but there's a responsibility we all share, and that is, are we going to accept that sacrifice on our behalf? And if we do, what does that mean for the rest of our lives? There is change that comes about in our lives when we accept that. We become a different person. We become much more Christ-like, and that's a work of a lifetime. We're told sanctification is a work of a lifetime that follows that. But it is a very simple principle. It's a very simple story to relate. Jesus died to pay for our sins. That's what Easter's about. That's what I'm challenging you In spite of all of the things that are happening over Easter, all the distractions that are around, to relay this simple story to your children, relay it to your friends, relay it to people you come in acquaintance with. That's what we're commissioned to do. That's what Jesus asked us to do before he went back to heaven. With that, we're going to have a closing song, and we'll...
With the video.
Is it a video? Okay, we'll do that, and then we'll have a closing prayer.